Welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats podcast, our New York Rangers podcast from the New York Post. Jake Brown here with Mollie Walker and Andrew Harts. And let's just get right to it. A colossal failure for this team. A team that was expected to contend for a cup was beat by the Devils, a team that's been in the playoffs once in the last decade, with a goalie who had 18 career starts, who turned the series on its head. It went from 2-0 to 4-3. The Rangers were outclassed. They were outmanned. And all the talent in the world, which apparently means nothing to Coach Gerard Gallant, who thinks it's not about talent, in his question by our esteemed colleague, Mollie Walker, he said, it's not about talent. It's not about having Patrick Kane and Tarasenko and trading everyone to win right now. What did they do? They were embarrassed. 2-4-0 shutouts in the swamps of New Jersey. Pathetic. A no-show. An absolute no-show. Me and Andrew were at the Rangers watch party at the Stumble Inn, and we had to stumble home, just like the Rangers are, stumbling home. It's like they were drinking the free high noons, and we weren't. We were drinking on the Rangers tab. They should have got me caviar with that. What a pathetic showing. This team was destined for a cup with this roster, and instead it's a first-round exit. A team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals, now wins 7 less playoff games this time around. Kane's a free agent. Tarasenko's a free agent. A couple of restricted free agents in Miller and Lafreniere. And there is no positives to take out of this season, Mollie, because a first-round playoff exit and a nice regular season is nothing to write home about. And now the Rangers will write home. They will ride home and to the offseason, and a very questionable offseason with not a ton of money left to spend. And there's going to be moves to be made. Maybe someone gets cut. Maybe it's Gallant. Who knows? But this is a disgraceful ending. Congrats to the Devils. They just outmanned the Rangers, but that should not have ever happened. Man, Rangers fans are pissed off, and rightfully so today.
I definitely think that this one hurts 10 times more than what happened last season. And I think that's probably the biggest thing to take out of this, honestly. It's such a colossal letdown. You look at this team on paper, and I genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that years down the line, people are going to look back at this roster and this lineup and just think, how the hell did that team not get out of the first round? Get out of the first round, let alone go on and win the Stanley Cup, because the team that I saw in games 1 and 2 was absolutely capable of it. They got comfortable. They seemed pretty impressed with themselves, thought that it was going to be a coast to the second round. And, you got to tip your hat to the Devils, because they made such strong adjustments in how they defended the Rangers' power play, just completely took it out of the series. The way that they pushed the Rangers to the outside, the change that they made in goal, the Devils had something to rally behind. And, the Devils had nothing to lose in Game 7, and the Rangers had everything to lose. And I think that's what we watched play out on the ice. Just disappointing is really the word that comes to mind. And I don't blame Ranger fans for taking this season's loss in the first round 3 times as hard as they did falling short of a Stanley Cup final berth.
And Mollie, on top of that, the Bruins were eliminated. Like, the path was there. It was clear. It was like Rangers to the Cup. You just got to get past Carolina, get past either, Florida, Tampa, whoever, and you had a chance to win a cup. Colorado was out. The West was clearing up. And it was like Noah's Ark. It was opening up. 40 days and 40 nights until a Stanley Cup championship. I don't know if that made sense, but I tried my best. And how it ends like this, and to a rival across the Hudson, to a state that is not as good as we are in New York. I'm sorry, Mollie, but you've admitted to you're in New York now. It is a damn shame. Andrew Harts, our resident Ranger fan, I know you were pissed off too. You were getting emotional standing next to me last night. Are you okay today, or are you in a state of depression?
It's not so much depression, it's just feeling numb. That's what it feels like. It's numb because, like Mollie said, when you look at this team and you look back on it, it's going to be like, for me, the Yankees in 2006, where the Yankees that was the whole murderer's row and Cano, where you look and you see all these Hall of Famers and these all-stars in the lineup, and you go, how do they not win? And honestly, that's how this team is going to be. And you think about Patrick Kane, future Hall of Famer, Vladimir Tarasenko, Chris Kreider, whose number will probably be hung up in the rafters, Igor Shesterkin, young players, Artemi Panarin, Keandre Miller, all these guys where it's promise. And we watch this team. All three of us watch this, including Larry as well. We watch this team produce and look great in game 1 and game 2. And then just something flipped once the Devils won in overtime. And I'm sorry, for a team that started the series 2-0, for them to essentially go 4-1 the rest of the way, that's just beyond unacceptable. And it's frustrating. It's disappointing. It's mind-numbing. And that's why, even watching last night, just going home and just thinking about how we got here, the whole series in my mind comes to the first goal that was scored last night. A shorthanded goal, unnecessary, very sloppy, just not well prepared for that situation. The Rangers came out looking like they didn't want to play. They came out looking slow. The Devils, and I know this is very cliche to say, and I tweeted it last night as well too, the Devils look like the team that wanted it more. And in game 7, you need to want it. And the Rangers just didn't look like they wanted it. I don't get it. I don't understand.
It was the 2 shutouts for me. How does a lineup with this star power not find the back of the net once? And I am not taking anything away from Akira Schmid. And it almost pisses me off how many Ranger fans are not giving Akira Schmid as much credit as he deserves. This is a 22-year-old goalie, rookie, playing in his first ever playoffs. He comes in with his team down 2-0, dead in the water of this series, and he rose to the occasion. He gave them key save after key save. He was steady. His demeanor flowed up through the rest of the Devils lineup. And this was an infant back there, basically. And you know what? The Rangers did not test him nearly enough. They did not capitalize on that opportunity in front of them. They had opportunity after opportunity to make the necessary adjustments, to change even just a little bit their game plan of how they were going to pressure this kid. And it just never really came through. It didn't really, he made big saves. He really did. But it just didn't feel like he had nearly as much of a workload as Igor Shesterkin did, especially as the series unfolded, obviously. I really give all the credit to Akira Schmid, but for these guys not to score once in 2 games and score 2 goals in all 4 of their losses, the disparity in the scores was one of the craziest thing to me of this series. It really was a layer that I probably was not expecting to unfold in this series at all.
Schmid started 14 games this year. You're right. He was great, but he was 9-5. Schmid was mid this season. That's just what he was. Let's be real. He showed up, and 4 games, 2 shutouts cannot happen. Get a refund. Give the fans a goddamn refund, and refund the toll too. Refund their easy pass for making the trip to New Jersey. I noticed game 7, they were shooting to his glove side a lot, and he had it locked down on the glove side.
Did.
I don't know if you could have adjusted in between the pipes, shoot to his non-glove side, but he was every big save he made, and the Rangers had opportunities, but like Hart said, it looked like the Devils wanted it more. What'd you think of Gallant's response to your question about talent, Molly? What'd you think of his answer?
I don't think he's necessarily wrong. There were a lot of times in this series where the team looked like a collection of stars rather than an actual cohesive team. And a lot of the times it kind of felt like they were just waiting for it to happen for them instead of actually going out and doing it, that they thought that they can rest on their laurels and on their skill and their high-end talent that they had in abundance on this team. But as Chris Kreider always says, the will comes before the skill, and that part never really showed up in the Rangers game. And if you look up and down the lineup, you can count on one hand the guys who really showed up in this series. Igor Shesterkin, Nico Mikkola, Chris Kreider. Even though he had a tough game 7, Chris Kreider showed up in this series and did his part. Then you go around. Mika Zibanejad, 1 goal. Artemi Panarin, 0 goals. Patrick Kane had 1 good game. And again, Patrick Kane is not the player that he was. He's clearly been labored since he came to New York. So, that's a whole different discussion about whether or not getting him was the right decision for this Rangers team. The kid line, not that great. Not that Alexi Lafreniere, 0 points. It just across the board, a lot of this team did not fully show up in this series. It was just a lot of mid, like a lot of mid performances and a lot of downright really disappointing performances. And it just, when you have the skill that they had not to produce, it just is such a letdown. It doesn't, last season when they went up 2-0 against the Lightning and lost 4 straight, it was a completely different series, completely different circumstances. The Rangers were gassed. They were hurt. You couldn't say that about this team. They didn't look gassed. They didn't look, it just looked like there was no urgency, no oomph, no, going out and taking it. And it just ended in an absolute first round flop for the Rangers. And somebody will probably have to answer for this.
Do you think Gallant should be fired?
There's arguments on both sides. And I'll start with why he shouldn't be. Here's a guy that led this team to back-to-back 100+ point seasons. You can't argue with that. The Rangers have gotten into the playoffs easily the last 2 seasons. They've been locked in months before the end of the regular season, and that's just not anything you could ever take away from Gallant. The other thing, the options out there, not that great. There's been some conversation about Joel Quenneville. Maybe, yes, he's probably the best option out there right now. Do the Rangers want that PR nightmare after everything that he went through in the last year? Probably not. Does he want the spotlight of New York after everything he went through in the last year? Probably not. Doesn't really seem like a good match. Peter Laviolette, 1 playoff win since 2018. Is that the guy who's going to take the Rangers to the next step? I don't know. They just missed Barry Trotz. I don't necessarily think that there's anybody better out there at the moment, which I think should probably play a big role into it. Andrew, you have a thought?
Can I ask you about someone that they interviewed in the past who works a studio position, who has a banner up in the rafters? Could someone like Mark Messier? I know he doesn't really have the experience, and it's always tough to fire a franchise icon if it doesn't work out, but could he be an option?
I think that if they wanted him to be an option, it would have happened already. It would have happened before Gallant, I think. So, but again, who knows? Who knows? Maybe they do think that a guy like Messier could be the one to help them take the next step. And who's to say that he wouldn't be able to? But I don't know if there are better options out there than Gallant right now. Why he should be fired is also, there's plenty of arguments there too as well. How did he not get this team up for a first round playoff series against a quote unquote rival? How did this team post zeros in 2 games? Of course, a lot of that falls on the players, but, and I understood the Rangers' point of view, that they're not a team that needs to make big speeches. They're not, Jacob Trouba is a lead by example kind of captain, not necessarily the helmet tossing guy that we saw in December. That's their thing, and that's totally fine. But that it was so clear that this team needed to be fired up by something or someone. And oftentimes that comes down to the coach, whether, he's never been a big pregame speech kind of guy, but there's a way to go about it, I'm sure, that doesn't include doing things like that. So I think it does fall on the coach's shoulders when the team does get up for the biggest time of year. I think that Lindy Ruff made the adjustments in this series and Gallant didn't. I think Tarasenko was grossly underused. I think that the adjustments that were made later in the series felt a little bit too late, but of course, why would they change anything after those first 2 games? But maybe after game 3, there should have been some sort of adjustments, just so that they're not deploying a brand new lineup in an elimination game 6, which of course worked out to their favor. But it wasn't so much of, it was more so the Devils not rising to the occasion in that game, I think. So there's arguments for both sides. Sometimes I think that Gallant's coaching style might not be the best fit for certain guys on the team, like an Artemi Panarin. So I think there's a lot of layers to be taken into consideration here, and it will be really, really interesting to see where they go from here. But of course, you look at Turk's track record. He's never made it through a 3rd season as a head coach in the NHL. So it's kind of like, do you just do it now, or does the track record speak for itself? And do you want to leave it up to chance that you're going to have to do it in the middle of next season, which obviously nobody wants to be making a coaching change in the middle of the season either. So it could go one or two ways, obviously. So, but I really don't know what the right answer is. It's kind of dependent on what the Rangers value more.
And, you got to answer questions on the ice too. Like Kane and Tarasenko, they're not taking hometown discounts, no. I don't think, to stay here for a few million. So this is going to be a different roster, Molly, going into next year. And it might take a big trade. It might take, not bringing back, a Lafreniere. It might take a decision that might anger some people, but there has to be changes. You can't just roll out the same team 3 years in a row.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Rangers are going to be right back where they started probably at the start of this season before the trade deadline without 2 top 6 right wingers is pretty concerning because that's what they've needed to get the last 2 seasons at the trade deadline. And it's worked out, both seasons in terms of who they acquired. I don't think there's a chance for Patrick Kane to come back strictly because, I don't know if he's going to have off-season surgery, not be able to start the season right away. I don't think the Rangers would be interested in that, nor do I feel like they can afford him. Tarasenko might be amenable to taking a bit of a discount to stay, but I think that depends on a few things. But I also am not going out saying that that's likely either. You look at it, they're going to probably want to try and plug Lafreniere and Kakko back into the top 6, but it didn't work. It hasn't worked out. It just hasn't worked out at all. And it's looking like Barclay Goodrow and Jimmy Vesey are going to be the 2 top 6 right wingers, but that's only if nothing really drastically changes. And I do think that there will be at least one drastic change, whether it be not bringing back Lafreniere or trading Barclay Goodrow. Because you can't have a 4th liner making over $3 million a year. It's not practical. The Islanders, I feel like are an example of that as well. So, but that's the thing. Barclay Goodrow is probably the best option they have for a top 6 right winger, though, at this moment in time, in terms of track record, because Lafreniere, I mean, Kakko had some decent stretches, and maybe he would benefit from a long run in that position, but it's really tough. There's a lot of tough decisions ahead, how much they want to change, how much they don't want to change, and I guess we're just gonna have to see how it all plays out here.
Is this just all a thing for Chris Drury to kind of figure out in terms of roster construction? Just because it's like you said, they're winding back up in the same situation where we started the year, and then you're going to have to go out and do the same thing all over again, God willing that the Rangers are as good or are in a position to make a run for Stanley Cup playoffs. Is this a Chris Drury problem? Is this just like what the Rangers have gotten themselves into? Like how does he fix this at this point?
It's definitely a Drury problem. I mean, he's the guy that's assembling the personnel on this team. And I think a huge issue for the Rangers with what they have now is they haven't transitioned guys onto the right side as much as they have an abundance of left wingers. They don't have any right wingers. And, these players are capable of making the switch. It's just a matter of actually, committing to it and making them figure it out. Like Lafreniere hasn't had, he's had stretches, but nothing really long term or anything like that, but again, it's because it's not working out. So that also makes sense too. It's definitely a construction thing. Look, there's an argument to be made that they went too all in on skill, but I think I said this to you before we started recording. Someone asks Chris Jury during breakup day, was getting Patrick Kane a mistake? I could tell you right now what his answer is going to be. You have the opportunity to acquire Patrick Kane for as little as he did. You take that every single time, because a Patrick Kane operating at 50% is still better than probably half the NHL. So not to say that, those moves were the wrong moves, because I really don't think they were. This is the genetic makeup of the Rangers. They are a high skill team, and they are a team that is so, dependent on their individual talent. So the route that Drury took was kind of embracing that, which is not, I don't think that was necessarily the wrong thing. The Rangers have never been apologists for having a star goalie over these, couple decades now, and they shouldn't be. They do have that, to their advantage. And it should be that with that net, and then a team that can outscore anybody 9 out of 10 times, that's a winning formula. It's just a matter of going out and executing it. And that's not what happened this postseason at all. But it definitely is on Drury to reevaluate how this lineup is constructed, what sort of pieces he wants to add. Do the Rangers want to add a bit more toughness and a bit more sandpaper to the lineup to make it less homogeneous? I think so. I think that might be at least one player will probably come in and have that sort of genetic makeup to try and break up this high skilled lineup that they have that, gets bodied off the puck, is shooting from far away. It definitely got a little bit too much of a one note with this team. So that might be a starting point for Drury this offseason.
But that's where I'm kind of curious about in terms of the coaching. And I know, we, like you mentioned, there's reasons to bring Gallant back, reasons to let him go. My thing is, personally, like you said, these players are capable of moving. Is it just a matter of coaching that these guys don't know how to coach them to play the way that would fit the system? Is it that the players just don't have the talent? They don't have they're too much one ways. Like that's where I feel like, at least coaching wise, again, like you look at a guy, and I know this is completely different, but look at a guy like Capo Caco. Capo Caco was taken right after Jack Hughes, right?
Yeah.
And both of them during that whole draft process and the period and everything like that, where they were talking to go, they can go 1 and 2 or
Vice versa. Yeah.
It could have gone either way, and it just so happened to fall that now the best player in this series was Jack Hughes, no doubt about it. And Kako, just a guy has just never really developed. Is that a problem that the Rangers have in terms of developing these guys? Because again, look at Alexis Lafreniere. I mean, I know that draft class was not great, and he was
the consensus number one, yeah.
Right. And he hasn't really developed here. Is that a problem that the Rangers have in terms of coaching and developing players?
I think development has been at the forefront of some of the Rangers' issues over the years, but it mostly falls, it's manifested in players like Vitaly Kravtsov and Lias Andersson, who have just been colossal letdowns again. But I think with Lafreniere and Kako, I think their circumstances have also impacted. Like, I think Lafreniere could go somewhere else and be a star. I think that is totally a possibility. I don't think that Lafreniere and Kako have been set up for success as much as they could have been on other organizations that didn't have the top 6 that the Rangers have. But you look at who are you taking out of that top 6 to make room for Lafreniere and Kako? Nobody. Artemi Panarin once said to me, the left side's pretty crowded. Laf's gonna have to figure out how to get it. It's true. He's not wrong. It's an absolutely loaded left side. So he's gonna have to make it work if he wants to make it work with the Rangers organization in general. I don't know. I'm not as well versed on the nuances of what it's like to coach a player to switching to his offside, but in the sample size of games that we've seen a guy like Lafreniere try it out, it just hasn't worked. And you're not going to make Chris Kreider, a veteran who's been thriving in the spot that he's been in for the last 2 seasons, you're not going to move that. why would you do that? Especially last season. I remember when there was, some talk to Gallant about switching Kreider because it wasn't working for Lafreniere. My guy scored 52 goals last season, like, are you going to really take him out of a situation that he has thrived in? No. So whether if it's a development thing, I think it's more so of the circumstances in the hand that Kakko and Lafreniere have been dealt. They just haven't been set up or introduced into that sort of top six, high caliber NHL player workload that they might have gotten on other teams. And I think that is forced them to work with what they have. And it at times has manifested in them, being better together than they are apart, those three guys. And that has worked for the Rangers at time. It worked for them last season, that's for sure. But there was just something about this postseason that, the kids were right there with everybody else, just not that great, not very impactful. Philip Hedl signs an extension. You think he's going to come out like a bat out of hell, looking to prove himself. It just never really came through. None of it ever really came through. But I think it's a toss up. It's tough to say if it's a development thing for the Rangers, because I don't really look at those guys as they're still developing. I really don't. They're in their third, fourth, years in the league at this point. It's time. It would be around time for them to be maybe changing of the guard with the top six. But that's the thing, they're not. The top six that the Rangers has been. Mika Zibanejad was their best player all season. Straight up. And, he comes back in the playoffs and it just was a tough time for him. So it was just a lot of letdown across the board.
Colossal failure, colossal disappointment. Colossal is the word of the day here in Rangers land, as they have hit another crossroads this offseason. Lots of decisions to be made, lots of changes to be made, and Rangers fans are left outside in the streets of Newark having to hear Devils fans play the goal song outside of my guy Kevin's American Whiskey in New Jersey, and they're all playing the song, dancing, and they have every right to do so. Embarrassing. 2 wins away from the Stanley Cup Finals last year, 2 wins from the second round, and a chance to go on another run this year, and now it's all over. Rangers fans are left watching the Knicks. The Yankees be terrible. The Mets be mediocre. And on to the next sport here in New York. We will close out this very colossal, disappointing end of Up in the Blue Seats next. Alrighty. That says goodnight to episode 124 of Up in the Blue Seats, our Rangers podcast from the New York Post. Thanks to Andrew Harts for helping me in producing the show. Now, this could be the finale. If Gallant is fired, we will bring you another emergency episode before Mollie. Hopefully you take a nice vacation. Got any trips planned besides Raleigh, now that you I guess aren't going to Raleigh unless they make you cover the Devils, and then you do have to go to Raleigh?
No, there will be no trips to Raleigh this season. I'll probably take a week off shortly after all the off-season stuff wraps up for the Rangers. They got breakup day on Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is. Yes, tomorrow, Wednesday. Gonna go to the Bahamas with my friends later in the summer. That's the only thing on the itinerary right now. But yeah, it's definitely a lot earlier of an off season than last season.
I think part of you's happy that you get a break, but part of you sad because what could have been? Like, you could have covered a championship team for the first time in your career, and you being still, in your mid-20s, the Rangers were unfortunately mid and not, veterans like they should have been. And it would have been cool for you to get to, be part of a parade. Maybe Mollie Walker and Larry Brooks on a float down the Canyon of Heroes. Would have loved to see it.
I really thought this team was capable of doing it, especially after watching them in those first 2 games. I really was like, well, I'm fully prepared to be working through June. After what I saw in games 1 and 2, they were just spectacular. So I think to get a taste of what we thought we were going to see for the entire playoffs, only for it to end the way that it did, was definitely disappointing for everybody involved, even them. No one more than the team in that locker room, and I can tell you that firsthand, just judging by the looks on their faces. It just absolutely stunned. The fact that this roster could not get it done, but that's how she goes.
In good times, in bad times, I'll be there evermore. That's what these crappy teams are for. Outscored 10-2 in the first 2 games, and then in the 4 losses, 13-2. Talk about a turn of events, and boy, that escalated quickly. Well, you could catch up on all old episodes. You got an entire off season to do it on the New York Post Sports YouTube page. Just search for Up in the Blue Seats and Apple, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. And to follow Mollie's off-season adventures on Twitter at Mollie Walker, 2 E's, 2 R's. And if you're a Mets fan, amazing but true, and follow me at Jake Brown Radio. For Mollie Walker, Andrew Harts, I'm Jake Brown. We'll see when we're back. If Gallant's fired, we'll see you. If not, I guess we'll talk to you next season. Thanks for listening to Up in the Blue Seats all season, and take care, everybody.